Okay, so here's our HTTP request happening right within our controller, but we want to change things around a little bit to make things more reusable for the rest of our application. Now, it's perfectly reasonable to expect that we would have these HTTP requests to certain resources, like our classifieds data here, to be needed in more than one spot throughout the application. And so this same GET request is probably eventually going to be needed elsewhere in our application as well. Now, what we could do is we could just copy all of this into whatever other controller we need it in. But then what happens if we need to make a change to it? Well, we would need to go into each controller that it exists in and make the change there. The better way is to offload this into its own dedicated spot and then make use of it wherever we want. And the way that we do this is with a service. Now, there are a couple different ways to create services in Angular, and the details can get a little bit confusing, but we're just going to go ahead and use what's called a factory. And to create a factory, we need to first create a new JavaScript file. So let's create a new file over here in components, and we are going to call this classifieds.fac for factory.js. And we always want to start with our iffy, which is the immediately invoked function expression. And then we'll invoke it there right away. And we want to use strict. And then what we'll do is say angular.module. And then we'll get a hold of our ng classifieds module. And on that, we want to create a new factory. Let's call this one classifieds factory. The signature is a lot like the other things we've seen, like controllers. We just have to provide an anonymous function as the body of our factory. And in this function, let's inject HTTP, just like we were in our controller. Now, factories need to return an object, and on this object we want to have a property called getClassifieds. And this is going to be pointing to a function that we're going to define called getClassifieds. So up here, let's create that function. And what we want to do is simply return the HTTP request. So we'll say HTTP get, and we want to have it pointing to that same data/classifieds.json file. Instead of handling the promise in the then method within this getClassifieds function, we're going to do that in our controller. So what we're doing here is we're creating a new factory, and we are returning out of this factory a method called getClassifieds, which is defined right here. This method just returns an HTTP GET request to our data. And before we can make use of this, we have to now make reference to it here in our index.html file. So let's come down and maybe just copy this line, and we will switch out controller for factory. So that will be coming through now, and it will be loaded, ready for us to use. Then what we have to do is within our controller, we have to inject that factory. We can inject the classifieds factory. And now we can change this line up to have our factory method be called. So classifieds factory dot get classifieds. And the rest is really the same. We access the promise via the then method. And once that's resolved, we put our data on scope. So just to make sure that's working, let's go back and check the browser. If we refresh, everything is still coming through just fine. So let's recap that again. We created a factory, which is a spot where we can house our HTTP request and only define it one time. Now we can make use of this factory method anywhere within our application. All we've got to do is take the name of the factory, which is classifieds factory in this case, and inject it wherever we want to. In this case, we're injecting it into our classifieds controller, and then we access the getClassifieds method on the factory. Again, that getClassifieds method is returned from the factory here. And that's all for factories and HTTP that we need to know for now. In the next section, we'll actually start building out the functionality for users to be able to create, update, and delete classified ads, and we'll make some refinements to the user interface as well.